need to hear is the sound of that wood, and you know where you are. Good evening, and welcome to this very special edition of Front Row. I'm Tom Larson, and for the next half hour, we will look at the past, the present, and the future of a true New England original, Candlepin bowling. It is a sport that exists for the most part only in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine, and through the past century has had a very special meaning for many native New Englanders. And why not? It was invented right here in Worcester. Justin P. White is credited with being the inventor of Candlepin bowling, although the sport of bowling has been around in various forms since the time of the Egyptians. There were many types of pins back then, but it was White who came up with the idea of very thin dowel-like targets.
Some people refer to it as candlesticks because the original candlepin was exactly that. It was simply a dowel or a candle about 8-10 inches high with a 3.5-inch bowling ball. And then it wasn't until about 1895 that Jack Munsey, who was considered the really founder of modern candlepins, came out with the specifications for the size of the bowling ball, the size of the pin, the specifications for the lanes, etc., that we're still using today.
The candlepin lanes in the early 1900s were originally found in the back of lounges and pool halls.
A lot of them were places where they booked numbers and a lot of illegal betting and so on and so forth. And I remember when my father started in the business, some of his friends, the neighbors told him that nice people wouldn't go into bowling alleys.
It was a tougher game at that time. I mean, they had wooden pins, they had deep gutters, they had the pin boys, so the machines weren't there to make the pins come back on. It was tougher scoring and very competitive.
My dad was a pretty good bowler, bowling with a league from the telephone company, and I can remember him sort of decrying that candlepin thing that they do up there.
At that time, the game was not only challenging but popular, getting just as much media exposure as the Red Sox.
I had an old-timer come and just sit in the audience. He was a pin boy for Babe Ruth. He had to set the pins for Babe Ruth, and Babe, of course, would go out. It was in Arlington, smoke his cigars, drink his beer, bowl. And he tipped him $5. And I love the story because we're talking 1920. And $5 was big, and this guy remembers the day.
The top hats and the sports coats and whatnot, it was an event. And every small town and burg to every large city had bowling centers. Unfortunately, they were in saloons and lounges, but they were also in community centers and churches and whatnot. So bowling was attractive to all people, all genders, all ages, and all sizes.
And it provided employment. Because there were no automatic pin setters yet, pin boys were in demand.
We used to set up like 60 pins a night, 6 strings, and you work on probably from 6 at night till maybe 12 o'clock at night.
And it was tough because, number one, you never set them up fast enough. Number two, you never set them up on those spots accurately enough.
Each pin boy had 2 alleys. We used to jump in, set the pins up and everything. And two of them, they're wise guys, they throw together. I got a pin on the side of the head. And I told the guy I was going to quit because I went home and showed my father the mark. I was going to get a beating, which I did. He didn't believe, he thought I got in a fight.
We had 2 kids that actually got concussions. And we experimented with wearing hockey helmets at one time because the pins would fly around your head and could hit you, might eventually kill you.
The safetiness of having people behind setting up pins was a big concern. Not to mention the continuity of how it was set up. Bowlers would complain that the pin boy didn't set up the pins exactly right and accurately.
But fortunately for bowlers and unfortunately for pin boys, technology solved the problem.
The first automatic pin setter came to Candlepin bowling in 1945. And we went from the small 4, 5, and 6 lane bowling centers, we started to go to the 8s and the 10s because the automatic pin setter allowed us not to have the problem of getting pin boys.
Nothing beat that. Nobody can get hurt anymore. We used to line the pins up and then take them one at a time, put them up like that. The machine just brings it down, boom, it's all set.
And then it was the beginning of the 50s, 1950, 51, that it really started to mushroom out, that proprietors saw that this was the wave of the future to go automated, just like the automobile evolved, the pin setter evolved, and that was the first foray of Candlepin expanding into the larger bowling centers.
But automatic pin setters were not the only changes happening in the sport.
We went from wooden pins to plastic-coated pins to all plastic, which increased the scores because they were more lively.
When they had the wooden pins, the scores were, I mean, if you had an average of 100, you were good. Then they started to speed up the alleys.
Rubber sidewalls, different pins. They're lighter. They're plastic now instead of wood with plastic coated. They put silicone on the lanes. They do everything they can to make it faster.
It made you appreciate the scores that they hit way back when they were a little tougher. When they hit a good score, you really knew that they really earned what they hit.
But the changes proved to be a good move. Bowling alleys took off in the 50s and 60s.
Everyone bowled. If you didn't bowl in 2 leagues, you were considered sort of an outcast. Really, I'm not kidding. Everyone bowled, old, young, and everyone. And it was a great time.
It was a very popular thing to do, you know, especially in the winter. If we had a harsh winter, you know, you want to be indoors, you know, that's something that you could do.
Across the country, everyone was bowling. But amazingly, candlepin bowling was only in New England. Everywhere else, 10-pin was the craze.
There was an overbuilding of bowling centers all over the place. So that was the first attempt by 10-pin and by Brunswick and AMF to bring 10-pin into New England, and they thought they were going to put Candlepin out of business, and they pretty much flooded the market. They made easy financing available to everyone, and what they did was they oversaturated the market with bowling centers, just about in every corner. And what they found was that people still loved Candlepin bowling.
And I think why it didn't go anywhere else is because it was a hard game. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's where it is. New England's a tough group of people that want competitiveness.
You know, you can throw the ball in the same spot, and sometimes you get a strike, and sometimes you just get the back row, and it really is unpredictable.
You could always bowl the best game ever. Any really good 10-pin bowler has bowled 300.
And I think it was Ted Williams said, the hardest thing to do is to hit a round object with a round object, and everyone knows he must have been talking about Candlepin bowling.
Just the thrill of being able to accomplish something. I think, you know, to be able to, you know, you don't have to be 6'10", you can be short like me and still be good at it.
It's a type of sport that you can play from 2 or 3 years old as long as you can walk.
The challenge, the excitement, the thrill of candlepins is something that no other game in the bowling industry will ever see.
It's hard to believe today, but in its heyday, the top candlepin bowlers were sports celebrities in New England. Names like Archie Walsh, Paul Polar, and Minnie Barden all achieved fame in the early 1900s. Later, people such as Tony Baldinelli and Charlie Jutras often made the sports pages, but perhaps the biggest name ever in candlepin bowling was Stacia Zernicke, whom many consider to be the greatest candlepin bowler of all time.
You don't even have to mention the last word, and if you mention Stacia, they know who it is.
Husband and longtime candlepin promoter Tony Zernicke remembers Stacia's first time at the lanes.
She happened to look in. There was a little opening for the where you could see the bowlers bowling, and they had 4 lanes, and she said, I'd like to try this. And so she did, and then from then on she just progressed.
There haven't been many athletes who dominated a sport like Stacia did during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. She was world champion 8 times.
I have never in my life seen anyone who was so well coordinated. And she brought to bowling a grace and a style and a femininity that just set the game apart so that women were kind of happy to bowl.
I actually met her personally back in the early 80s when I first joined the Pro Tour. But before that, I was watching her on TV. Of course, I always knew who she was, and she was the best.
She didn't throw a lot of big strings, but she was always a consistent bowler. She always got her 9s and her 10s, and those add up after a while.
She had a knack for picking pins, and it means a lot between, you know, an extra 10 or 20 pins in a match.
And you know, she had a nice style. She always wore a skirt, and never saw her bowling in pants.
You just like to watch her, that's all.
She bowled a fella from Worcester where they put a screen up. You know, you couldn't see the pins. And he challenged her, so she said, sure, I'll try it. So you throw the first ball down, and naturally you don't know what pins are standing, so somebody tells you got the 6 pin, the 5 pin, or you got 5 and 7, and wood, and so on. Well, anyway, they bowled 3 strings, and she had 320, and the fella had 301.
We never stopped trying to figure the game out, ever. I think I miss that so much. She used to come down every Thursday and we'd try to figure it out. We never did.
We expected that she was going to win. She was confident that she was going to win. She was able to come back when she was down, and even if she didn't win, you know, she always had that great smile on her face.
She was the first woman to appear on Channel 5's bowling program and appeared on the show 55 times. She still holds several world records. In 1993, she contracted a rare blood disease and passed away at the age of 70. Recently, she was honored as one of New England's top 100 athletes of the century, and today, the Zernike House looks like a museum filled with her many accomplishments.
When the Webster Post Office was built in 1965, I took all these trophies down there for display. The postmaster asked me to do it, and by golly, I didn't break one. I took good care of them. I still do.
The reason Channel 5 started the program was because the Massachusetts Bowling Association came to them with a suggestion that there was a lot of interest in candlepin bowling, and could they consider the possibility of doing a show. And after some thought about it, they decided, well, yeah, I guess we could do it.
In the late 1950s, candlepin bowling met the television age, and a local phenomenon began that has rarely been equaled anywhere, all led by Channel 5's Candlepin Bowling with Don Gillis.
There were so many people who did candlepin bowling. I mean, who liked it, who for recreation. And so now they have an opportunity to see the best bowlers in the area and watch them. And I'm sure it's as someone is watching somebody who plays, if they themselves play tennis, you watch and say, well, how did he make that shot? And what did he do? Well, I think the people did the same thing there, or they just enjoyed the personalities of the thing.
He did it! He is the only man to ever have 11 marks in a row.
You saw local people. You saw people walking down the street, and you know that they were, you know, you'd say, yeah, you know, I saw you bowling on Channel 5.
That was the thing to look forward to for the year, to get on 5, you know, so everyone could see you, your family and everything could sit down and watch.
It was the most competitive to get on. You could only get on once a year. It drew a big crowd. And it obviously it had the most money.
Competition was great. Don Gillis was excellent, and the show was really first-class professional.
To be on that show, it was such an honor. And to have a guy like Don Gillis hosting the show and treat the bowlers like they're regular bowlers, and him being a guy who's done interviews with all the greats in all sports.
Don Gillis was the heart of it. When he took it on, it just took on a new meaning, I think, to everybody. He really lived it, and he made everybody feel special that was there. It was their day in the sun, and whether they did real well or just never came back again, he'd always remember their name if he saw them. He just made the person feel special. He was that kind of man.
My favorite expression when it got very tight, it was corny, but I used to say, oh man, this is getting close. Hang out to your tray tables, boys and girls.
He made hold on to your tray tables, ladies and gentlemen, household words. He probably sold more tray tables than the advertisers did.
Originally called Fun for All Ages, the Channel 5 show was regularly the highest-rated local sports television program. There were countless great moments over the years.
You can't talk about candlepin bowling without talking about Tommy Ulshaw.
Tommy Olster is, to me, the greatest candlepin bowler that we've seen in our time. He had 90 appearances over the years on our show, which is the most of anyone. And he was a remarkable bowler. He was what I call the Larry Bird of candlepin bowling.
It was something being 16 years old, having my picture in the paper, and hey, I saw you on TV. So it was nice. I grew up with that, and I met a lot of nice people through it.
He has another strike.
Paul Berger's 500. His 3-string total, that was just phenomenal. To do that on television, under the lights with that extreme pressure, I mean, I was sitting right there, just to the left of the lanes, and I just kept watching, and I said to myself, he's going to get 500, he's going to get 5, and he did.
That he was just getting up and firing and throwing. And we were going, oh my God, what's he up to now? We couldn't keep up with him. We literally couldn't keep up with him.
There's no doubt that day I was in the zone. You know, it's very rarely does everything go right, and you get a few breaks besides. That was one of those days.
That's it, the highest 3 ever in almost 34 years of this program.
In the 1970s and 80s, candlepin bowling shows were popping up everywhere.
I remember bowling in leagues, doubles leagues, where we had 20 or so teams, 40 bowlers, and you could look at them, and 27 or 28 of them had been on TV multiple times.
A few hundred people in town bowled, so they knew who you were. It was great. You were a local guy. Maybe thousands of people around here knew you. Everybody in town knew you.
In the airports of Florida, all the way to downtown Boston, I would say at least 3 or 4 times a week I'm asked questions about the game, and I haven't picked up a ball in a year and a half.
But in the 1990s, with the boom in cable TV and network affiliations, candlepin bowling would appear less and less on television, culminating with the final Channel 5 bowling show in 1996, ending a remarkable 38-year run.
I think the profit margin wasn't enough for the candlepin bowling show for the station to keep it on the air. And, you know, the assets were reallocated, and unfortunately that was the way they chose to go when they decided to take it off. It wasn't because there was any problem with the show or the show wasn't getting ratings.
The bottom line wasn't what they wanted, but the spectators were still there.
But it was an older audience, and it wasn't the people that were watching it that were able to go out and buy the big products to attract the big sponsors.
They taped on a Monday, and you didn't get people who were working. And so this is how they got the idea that old people watch the show, because the retired people were the only ones that could come and watch. And if they taped it on a Saturday or Sunday, a few times they did, and you saw an entirely different show.
They're talking about the age group that watched it, but I just can't see it. I can't see why they canceled it. Everybody, there's advertising for everybody, for every age group.
I mean, there were many times the ratings outrated the Red Sox, the Celtics, whoever. They were tops.
I never, ever have understood why they dropped it. Ever. It was the #1 rated show when they dropped it. If you can explain that to me, I don't know.
Fortunately, when the show went off the air, there were a lot of youngsters that looked up to the stars of the game, and they really don't have that anymore. There is a fine show that is put on by Winds of New England, but it's just something that the game, it was a phenomenon, candlepin bowling with Don Gillis. It sort of escapes definition, and I think the heart of the game really sort of, there's an aperture there now that wasn't there when that show was running.
I was out of the tour in Pennsylvania for about 8 years, and when I came back, the Pro Tour, which used to have a couple hundred bowlers, now only has about 55. So that's kind of an example of what's happened.
If you're wondering what effect the loss of television has had on candlepin bowling, you need only to look at the current Pro Tour.
When I first joined the Pro Tour back in 1982, there were, I don't know, 100 women. It was mobbed. Now, we're lucky to have 100 total, men and women combined.
I used to bowl like 38 to 40 10-string tournaments a year, and now we only got like 6.
I don't understand how people can just quit. I don't understand it. I don't know. I really don't understand.
More alarming than the drop in pro bowlers has been the decrease in places to bowl. There are several reasons.
Real estate values really hurt bowling. A lot of bowling centers were built on roads that were one time were back roads and streets that became major thoroughfares. And that property escalated in value so greatly, so quickly, that it became far more attractive to sell or lease the property out and make more money than you would as a bowling center.
All the major manufacturers, like the car dealerships, are looking for a nice building with a big parking lot, and the local homeowner there has got maybe $1 million or $2 million in his pocket, and he says, oh, you know, you can have it, I'm going.
You offered millions of dollars to build condos. Who's going to pass that up? Of course I would. I would pass it up and say no. You know, I'm taking my bowling alley away.
If it just didn't cost so much to build lanes, then I would see a future. The future I see now is maintaining mostly the ones who are still here.
In a lot of the houses, rather than expand or rather than modernize their facilities, decided to turn them in. Those of us who have survived have learned that the survival is based upon making your bowling center a modern place. Go with the times.
But that may be a reason in itself. Maybe the times have just changed.
You have a different social climate amongst the younger people in the 20s and stuff, and I think what we found is, yeah, they want to do it, but they don't want to do it every Tuesday night. You know, they'll do it when they feel like it.
The kids aren't involved as much because there's just too much for them. And I think that's got a lot to do with it, because there's so much for them to do.
I think a lot of these were family-run businesses, and there's a lot of hours to be put in. And I think a lot of the children of the owners thought, oh, I saw Mom and Dad working a lot of hours. I'm not sure I want to do that. So I think the future of this might be in chains of bowling centers, because there's certainly, it's a worthwhile venture to get into is bowling, because proprietors are making money in this industry.
I mean, the little kids now, they're getting into soccer and they're getting into other sports instead of bowling like it was on TV.
There's more things for kids to do, you know. And it's not on television anymore. It's got to be on TV. If you're a sport now and you're not on TV, you're nowhere.
I hate to look upon it as just having been a fad, because I think that it was more than that. It was a real genuine, and is a real genuine talent that you need to possess to excel at the sport. But I think that you need people to look up to, like a Don Gillis, or like a Tom Ulster, or like a Stacia Zernicke.
I think it can come back even better than it was, just by promoting it the right way. Get the kids interested in it.
There's no doubt in my mind that the popularity could come back. It just needs the right marketing and the right people to drive it.
We have not attracted enough youth in a continuous basis to keep filling in the ranks as we lose bowlers. And because we didn't, we are going to have a gap. But I think as more young people now are rediscovering bowling, it may take a few more years, but there's going to be some that want to simply continue to do it on a recreational level.
So what's being done about the problem? Well, at Pilgrim Lanes in Haverhill, bowling great Tony Marie Baldinelli has started an innovative kids program.
Our league has grown from I'm guessing around maybe 60, 70 kids to well over 100. They do 3 tournaments a year. We raise $20,000 to $25,000. We take them to Canada in March of every year, and they bowl tournaments up there.
It gives children an advantage to get out and see their friends, and it's just it's an all-around second family for everybody.
Then there is glow bowling.
We got a lot of phone calls, and people are looking for the glow bowling. They're looking for birthday parties, and another form, of course, of entertainment for the kids.
It's bringing a lot of younger kids into the bowling anyway. You know, whether they'll ever become competitive bowlers, I don't know, but at least it is getting some of the kids back into bowling.
Those that are modernizing, that are progressive ideas, giving their clientele, their customers, new innovative programs, new innovative look, are booming. They're absolutely booming, because that's what the public wants today.
Whatever the solution, the candlepin industry is ready to meet the challenge.
Just like we talked about the 60s, the thing that had to be done, get the bowling center out of the bar room and out of the down cellar situation. So now we're in the 90s, and a new revolution has to go on, and it's happening, and it's begun to happen.
1, 2, 3.
It draws people from all kinds of backgrounds, all different ages too. You see little kids with their parents, family. It's a family atmosphere, and that's what I really enjoyed about bowling. And it's just something everybody can do, and it's so nice walking into a bowling alley and seeing that.
So, as you can see, there is still plenty of hope for the future of this truly unique sport. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time in the front row.